I don't need the crown princess anymore. A reversal of the wind is like a resolution, whoever can continue the sentence will surely become my crown princess. The crown prince finished speaking, and the young ladies at the banquet spoke up one after another. The cold is beyond comprehension. The story of a lonely girl is hard to understand. But Crown Prince Finn Donald shook his head, his expression displeased. Today's banquet was organized by the Empress to select a wife for Finn. Originally, it was for the young ladies to show off their talents, but Finn suddenly changed the rules of the game. More than 10 young ladies from noble families failed one after another, and all eyes turned to me, everyone expecting me to stand up and take the lead. Even the Empress looked at me with eyes filled with hope. After all, my father was the head of the Hanlin Academy, my mother was the daughter of legal wife of the head of the Imperial Academy. Since I was born I was destined to enter the palace as a princess or concubine. But, in this life, I don't want to enter the palace anymore. I stood up, bowed slightly, and said in a hoarse voice, Your Highness, the person who truly shares your heart is not necessarily a young lady from a noble family, perhaps a daughter of a concubine of a noble family or a maid. Can your Highness expand the scope of selection? Finn's eyes lit up, and he waved his hand cheerfully. No matter who it is, as long as that person can continue the poem, she will definitely become my crown princess. I smiled slightly, I was waiting for him to say this. Then I pushed Flora, the trembling maid beside me, to the middle of the hall. Flora clutched the corner of her clothes, standing in front of the main hall in a panic. It seems that Miss Farah doesn't know how to continue the poem either. Could it be that her talent has always been fake? If her maid can continue the poem, will the crown prince really marry a maid as the crown princess? The chatter rose everywhere. Finn walked closer to Flora, his gentle eyes reassuring her. Don't be afraid, if it really was you last night, I will definitely give you a title. Flora's eyes were filled with tears, trembling as she spoke. A reversal of the wind is like a solution, it's not easy to break it. Finn's pupils suddenly contracted, he immediately grabbed Flora's hand, happily leading her in front of the Empress. Your Majesty, I have chosen her to be my crown princess. The entire hall instantly fell silent. The Empress's face turned pale and she slammed the table. Nonsense, how could the crown princess be a maid? She glared at me. If the crown prince wants to marry, you must marry Miss Farah. As for this maid, at most she will only be a concubine. I stepped out, met Finn's vicious gaze, and knelt down on the ground. The crown prince and Flora, both sides have deep feelings for each other. I don't want to steal someone else's marriage. Please, Your Majesty, withdraw the imperial edict. In my previous life, I thought Finn was sincere with me. Until I accidentally saw the letters he wrote to Flora, I found out that the two of them had already been having an affair. I chased Flora out of the East Palace, she committed suicide in frustration and both mother and child died. Before ascending the throne, Finn gave me a cup of poisoned wine. Only after I died did I realize that he had never forgotten Flora. In this life, I clearly knew that Flora had secretly memorized the poems I wrote when I was drunk, but I did not expose her. I fulfilled their wishes. Hearing what I said, Finn was stunned for a moment, then his face turned cold, and he sneered, Mother, Luna Farah can't even continue this simple poem, how can she be worthy of being the crown princess? I'm afraid that the poems she wrote before were also written by Flora. The Empress was momentarily speechless, her eyes filled with sorrow as she looked at me. Miss Farah, why can't you continue the poem? Aren't your parents great scholars of the time? When mentioning my parents, the rims of my eyes immediately turned red. In my previous life, if it weren't for me, how could they have been skinned and boned by the crown prince, and their bodies thrown into the cemetery for wild animals to eat? Reborn this time, I will absolutely not let my family fall into such a tragic situation again because of a poem. I knelt down and kowtowed, saying, I'm not a good match for the crown prince, please grant the crown prince and Flora a marriage. Finn held Flora's hand and knelt before the Empress. Flora mustered up her courage. Your Majesty, the crown prince is a dragon and phoenix among humans. If he takes a concubine in the future, I will definitely be tolerant and generous. The crown prince became angry, interrupted her, turned to the Empress and swore, Your Majesty, I and she will be a couple for life. I will absolutely not take a concubine. The empress snorted coldly, stood up abruptly, and looked at the two of them with disdain. I will grant you a marriage. Take care of yourselves. After the banquet, I left the palace, and before I could get into the carriage, I heard Flora calling from behind, Mississippi. She didn't salute me. Miss, won't you blame me for taking your poem? I smiled. That was when I was drunk. I don't even remember myself. How can it be called stealing? Before I finished speaking, she suddenly grabbed my hand and hit her straight in the face. Then she staggered and fell into the arms of Finn, who had just walked over. Miss, this servant did not mean to steal your glory, but this servant truly likes His Highness the Crown Prince. If you want to blame this servant, not His Highness the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince immediately blocked Flora behind him, his voice cold as ice as he warned, Luna Farah, from today on Flora is no longer your maid, you dare to attack the future Crown Princess. Before I could even explain, Flora's eyes were already red. Your Highness, we are not married yet, no matter if the young lady hits or scolds me, I am willing to endure it. As soon as she finished speaking, she pretended to kneel down, but was lifted up by the Crown Prince with both hands. He frowned, showing obvious disgust as he looked at me. Luna, I didn't expect you to be this kind of person normally. No wonder Flora's poems from beginning to end were filled with grievances. Flora burst into tears in his arms. Your Highness, the young lady is not the person you think she is, it's all my fault. He interrupted her, coldly snorting. That's not it, so what? Luna, aren't you just relying on your years of reading more books than others, daring to act noble and look down on others? But I hate the most the kind of noble daughter like you. On the outside you look as elegant as jade in water, but when you peel it off, you'll see that inside is all rotten cotton. Flora, I will personally invite the great scholars of the time to teach you the art of music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. I don't believe you can lose to Luna. Flora frowned slightly. Thank you, Your Highness, I will definitely study hard. I then glared and took a step back. In that case, on behalf of my family, I would like to thank Your Highness for teaching the maids in the mansion. However, Flora doesn't even know how to write. I'm afraid Your Highness will have to put in more effort. After I finished speaking, I got into the carriage, leaving the two of them behind. Flora had an outstanding appearance and was determined to climb high. Every time there was a banquet, she would secretly go and seduce the young masters of noble families. A few days ago, someone came to propose to her, but she refused. It turned out that she had set her sights on the Crown Prince. 3 days later, the Empress Dowager organized an art exhibition, asking the noble daughters to write poems for the paintings of the Imperial Academy students. Flora, as the Crown Prince's fiancée, naturally had to compete for the spotlight. During the exhibition, she wore a long gown embroidered with gold thread. The shirt was tied on her body, skillfully showing off her graceful figure, making the students unable to take their eyes off her. The young ladies chuckled in low voices. She's wearing such tight clothes, if she writes a poem later, she might expose her body. Flora's face changed. She stepped forward and twisted her waist to stand in front of me. Miss Farah, last time I stole your spotlight, today I will give you this opportunity to write a poem. She originally had no talent, she couldn't even write. She only memorized a few of my poems and caught the Crown Prince's eye. Now afraid of being exposed, she took 1 step back to take 3 steps forward. That's right, Luna Farah, aren't you the most talented woman in the capital? Today's chance to show off, I'll give it to you. Finn strode over to Flora, gently placing his hand on her waist, his eyes filled with deep affection that was hard to hide. The young ladies were indignant on my behalf, but they knew that Flora was deliberately making things difficult, and because Finn was the Crown Prince, no one dared to come forward to defend me. I glanced at Finn, turned around and walked to the painting. I can write a poem, but I have a request. Finn sneered, these noble ladies are best at pretending. Tell me, what do you want? I smiled faintly, looking towards the Empress Dowager. If I write a good poem, please grant me a marriage with the person who painted that painting. The Empress Dowager opened her eyes, glanced around at the Imperial Academy students, and said, all right. As soon as she finished speaking, the Crown Prince's body swayed slightly. Grant marriage? You are the daughter of the head of Hamlin Academy, how can you marry an ordinary student? If you have to marry, you should marry a prince. Moreover, Flora doesn't care about me taking a concubine. If you agree, I will allow you to enter the palace with Flora on the same day. Flora's face immediately turned ashen, her hand hidden in her sleeve clenched tightly, clearly not expecting the crown prince to say such a thing. I looked straight at Finn. Your Highness, didn't you say that you hated noble daughters like me the most? Why do you want to marry me now? Moreover, I am the beloved daughter of the head of Hanlon Academy, how could I be someone else's concubine? Finn hesitated. Flora is not like you, if you let her be a concubine, she will be bullied. Luna, can you bear to let people in your house be ridiculed? I almost laughed out loud. Your Highness, if you are worried about Flora being ridiculed, then don't marry me. Why do you have to make yourself suffer? Besides, I have never agreed to enter the palace. After saying that, I decisively turned around and went to choose a painting. The students of the Imperial Academy all raised their hands and pointed at their paintings, hoping that I would notice them and give them a chance to change their lives. There was only one painting, the bird flying alone in the mountains, that no one claimed was theirs. The painting had strong brushstrokes and a mature temperament. Other than the current Imperial tutor Jonathan Allen, I'm afraid no one else had such writing power. I picked up the brush and wrote on the painting, the bird flying alone in the mountains, thousands of mirrors and people destroy. The lonely Chusoa Lapong, alone in the cold river snow. As soon as I put down my brush, the surrounding area immediately erupted with endless exclamations of admiration. Great! Great! I, Jonathan, am so lucky to marry Miss Farah as my wife. I turned around, and from the crowd, a man wearing a moon-colored robe leisurely walked out, half smiling at me. It is rumored that the Grand Tutor of the Imperial Court, Jonathan Allen, is cold and aloof, yet has an outstanding appearance. Now that I have met him, he truly overshadows Finn. Finn glared at Jonathan. Grand Tutor, this time it's the student's painting that's hanging up. Why is your painting here? Jonathan smiled. This is understandable, I'm the Grand Tutor, shouldn't I set an example? Otherwise, how can I make the students of the Imperial Academy accept me? He turned to look at me. Miss Farah is the most talented woman in the capital. It is my honor to have her write a poem for me. If the Empress Dowager grants me a marriage, I will only have Miss Farah for the rest of my life. It is rumored that the Allen family has a family rule, not accepting concubines or taking concubines. Today, everyone has heard it with their own ears. It is indeed not a rumor. Suddenly, he looked at me and asked with a smile, Miss Farah, are you willing? I shook my head slightly. Of course I agree. He smiled. Then please, Miss Farah, come with me to ask the Empress Dowager to grant us a marriage. I nodded and was about to leave when the Crown Prince chased after me and grabbed my sleeve. Luna, I regret it. I told Flora to give up the position of Crown Princess to you, okay? I tugged on my sleeve. Finn lost his balance and fell flat on the ground. I turned around and walked side by side with Jonathan to the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager narrowed her eyes, looked me up and down, then laughed. I have a nephew called Ant. He is 23 years old and still hasn't married. Today he finally agreed to get married. I will immediately grant you a marriage. The Crown Prince's face immediately turned pale on the spot. The wedding was set for 10 days later, the same day as Finn and Flora's wedding. When the wedding procession passed by, they unexpectedly ran into Finn's group. He immediately jumped off his horse, lifted the red curtain of my palanquin, his eyes red, and asked hoarsely, Luna, don't marry him, marry me, okay? I raised my head. No. He immediately gasped, I won't marry Flora anymore. My palanquin was originally for you. You still won't forgive me? He pretended to pull me. I immediately put my foot in front of him. Who your highness marries is your highness's business, it has nothing to do with me. I hope your highness will respect yourself. His eyes drooped, and he suddenly grabbed my ankle, but the next second, Jonathan slapped him away. Your highness, this is my wife, please respect yourself. Finn staggered back a few steps, stood firm, and then threw a punch, but was stopped in midair by Jonathan. He struggled to pull away, gritting his teeth and saying, Lord Allen, Luna is my wife. Could it be that Lord Allen likes to pick up things that other people don't need anymore? Jonathan's jet-black pupils flashed with anger, his hands clenched into fists in his sleeves, I gently tugged on the hem of his shirt. He looked at me with gentle eyes, then turned his head to face the Crown Prince. Your Highness, that day's banquet was your deliberate choice to choose Luna's maid. Not marrying her now would be inhumane. As the successor to the throne, it would be unrighteous to snatch the wife of a subject in the middle of the street. Your Highness will have to inherit the throne in the future. Do you really want to do something inhumane and unrighteous? Moreover, the marriage between Luna and I was bestowed by the Empress Dowager. How can it be said that it is something your Highness no longer needs? With each word, Finn's face became darker and darker, his lips moved but he could not refute. Jonathan immediately pushed Finn away and ordered the palanquin to be lifted. Before the palanquin bearers could lift the palanquin, Flora rushed out from the crowd. She knelt down on the ground and crawled before me, tears falling like rain. Miss, I know I was wrong, I beg you to spare my life. Today was supposed to be her wedding day, but she was only wearing a thin servant's dress, without any of the charm of the painting exhibition. Seeing that I did not respond, she repeatedly cowed out and repented. Miss, this servant should not have seduced His Highness the Crown Prince, and even more so, should not have fantasized about the position of Crown Princess. But the Crown Prince is not human. He slept with me without giving me a title. As soon as the words were uttered, whispers and discussions arose in the crowd. How could the Crown Prince do such a despicable thing? The Crown Prince, it is not unusual for him to have sex with a maid, why do you say it is despicable? But the Emperor governs the country with virtue. If the Crown Prince does not keep his word, how will he govern the world in the future? Some people think it is good, others criticize it as moral corruption. Flora was still kneeling there, her eyes filled with panic. She had thought someone would speak up for her, but unexpectedly no one cared about the reputation of a lowly maid. This world has always been like this. Finn went from being drenched in cold sweat to being shameless in the blink of an eye. He glanced at Flora, his tone no longer showing any affection. You are just a little maid who learned a few lines of poetry from your young lady and dared to impersonate her at Apricot Blossom Garden. I was deceived by you, and now I have investigated the truth. I will immediately hand you over to the government. Flora grabbed my ankle, her face full of tears and snot. Miss, please save me, I am so miserable. I frowned. Finn immediately ordered someone to pull Flora away. She was helpless, suddenly pounced on Finn, grabbed his hair and face, and shouted, I will fight you to the death. She is a weak woman, no one knows where she gets her amazing strength. The two of them struggled together, 3 or 4 people rushed in but could not separate them. In a moment the sound of cries and cries filled the sky. Chaos was extremely. Someone quickly pull this servant girl out for me. Flora seemed to be making her final bet. She bit the Crown Prince's ear, biting off almost half of the earlobe, leaving no more. Blood was everywhere. The Crown Prince's eyes were red, he held his ear, and screamed like he was crazy, beat her to death. Beat this slut to death for me. Today is my happy day, we should not see blood. I slightly raised my head to look at Jonathan. Finally, it took a few strong guards from the Grand Tutor's residence to drag the 2 people out. But Flora, with her hair disheveled and her body disheveled, still refused to calm down. She was carried away by the guards, kicking the Crown Prince while crying and begging me. Jonathan ordered her to leave, gently helping me into the flower palanquin. I looked up at him uneasily. He looked at me gently, rest assured, leave it to me. In the flower palanquin, I lifted the curtain, saw him summon the imperial physician, and had someone carry the Crown Prince away. And then dispersed the crowd. By the time the flower palanquin arrived at the Grand Tutor's residence, the auspicious hour had passed. On the wedding night, I felt a little wronged. He brought the wine and gently touched the tip of my nose. Why is my wife so sad? I raised my head to look at him. Broad shoulders, thin waist, sword-like eyebrows, bright eyes. For a moment, I stared blankly, the words of complaint that were on my lips could not be uttered. He probably saw my thoughts, gently pulling me into his embrace. To marry you, any time is a good time. He gently lifted my chin. A wedding night passed by gently. Early in the morning, I woke up, the pillow was empty. I rubbed my still sore waist, called the maid in and asked, "Where is the Grand Tutor?" The maid helped me comb my hair and chattered on and on. The Grand Tutor heard that the madam likes to eat date cakes on the East Street. He woke up early and personally drove the carriage to buy some. I didn't show any emotion, just slightly raised the corner of my lips, silently searching in my mind for any traces related to him. Thinking for a long time, I still couldn't remember what kind of relationship I had with him. Not long after, Jonathan rushed in, his forehead covered in sweat. His face hurriedly pushed the door open and entered. At that time I was in his study, flipping through a book, just opened a small pink notebook. The cover was painted with colorful flowers, probably the type of talented men and beautiful women I liked. Just as I was about to flip through it, he strode closer, swinging his hand and pressing down hard on the book. I didn't understand anything, so I turned my head to look at him. The Grand Tutor, who was always as cold as jade, now had a rosy blush on his cheeks. My heart skipped a beat, and I glanced down at the pink book in my hand, and couldn't help but think. Could it be? This was a book of erotic paintings? I suddenly remembered that last night he was like a fierce tiger descending the mountain, and I was probably right. I pretended not to care, clapped my hands and stood up, smiling and asked, "Did you buy the date cake for me?" He was stunned for a moment, then reacted. One hand handed the cake to me, the other hand moved the small notebook behind his back. I took a bite of the cake. It was indeed freshly made, still hot. While eating the cake, I walked around his study, suddenly attracted by a painting on the wall. In the painting was a woman, sitting by the stream enjoying the cool breeze, her facial features very similar to mine. Under the stream was a young man in snow-white clothes, wearing a hat, catching fish. I suddenly remembered. That summer, my father took me back to my hometown in Qingzhou to avoid the heat. I liked to sit by the stream, and every day a young man wearing a hat would come and recite poems with me. "Is it you?" I blurted out. He took out a small notebook and covered half of his face, revealing only his bright black eyes. "What do you think?" "Similar. Too similar." I laughed, walked closer to him, conveniently took the notebook, and looked straight at him. "So it was you. Why did you have to cover your face then?" He chuckled gently. "That day, I had red pimples all over me, I couldn't help but cover it." I shook the notebook back and forth, pursed my lips and pondered a bit. "So that's how it is." He widened his eyes, his gaze fixed on my hand that was moving up and down with the notebook. I suddenly had a teasing mood, put down the tray of cakes, turned around, and abruptly opened the notebook. Page by page, pictures of me appeared, either laughing, sleeping, riding a horse, or reciting poetry. Every expression was clearly depicted. After flipping a few pages, my face was already redder than it could be, when suddenly a hand reached down from above my head, swish, and snatched the notebook away. I turned around, facing him, our eyes locked. Both of us were red in the face, our throats dry. Both of us spoke in unison. In the end, I was still more embarrassed, quickly pulling my skirt to leave. Suddenly a pair of strong arms hugged my waist tightly. His hot breath came to my ear. "Don't go." I just turned my head, but a strong kiss stopped all the words I was about to say. "Jonathan, you've liked me for a long time, right?" He nodded. "Yes, for a long time." We continued for 3 days and 3 nights, until the day we returned to my mother's house. He finally carried me down to bed to groom me. After we got married, Jonathan took great care of me, and within a month, I found out I was pregnant. During the banquet at the palace, he sat next to me, did not let me drink alcohol, and kept a close watch on me. I was not completely happy, so I followed his arrangement. During the banquet, the emperor invited him to discuss state affairs, and at that moment I saw Crown Prince Finn. After only a month of not seeing him, his eyes were already dark and his complexion was clearly haggard. The most noticeable thing was that a piece of his ear was missing. And his entire person looked extremely miserable. I heard quite a few stories about him, most of which were that because of his disfigurement, the emperor intended to make the third prince the new crown prince. Of course, he already knew about this. But everything about him had long since ceased to have any relation to me. I turned my face away, not looking any further. Feeling a little uncomfortable, I stood up and planned to go to the imperial garden to breathe some air. Unexpectedly, I still ran into Finn. Under the hexagonal lamp, he looked at me silently. Luna, I regret it. If you agree to a divorce, I will forget everything and marry you as my first wife. As for Grand Tutor Alan, wait until I ascend the throne, and I will marry the princess to him as compensation. Are you willing to come back to me? He walked step by step closer. I hugged my stomach and took a step back. It seemed that he still didn't understand his current situation. Only one step away from falling into the abyss. Your Highness, I am now the wife of the Grand Tutor, and I am also pregnant with the Grand Tutor's child. Please find someone more worthy. As soon as I finished speaking, his eyes widened and stared at my stomach, his voice cold. You are pregnant with Jonathan's child? I nodded. He immediately rushed forward, his eyes were fierce like a demon from hell. He swung his hand and grabbed my neck. Luna, without my consent, you dare to get pregnant with someone else's child? How many times have you done it? How did you get pregnant so quickly? I had difficulty breathing, tried to slap his hand, and shouted hoarsely, Finn Donald. You're crazy. Let go. Finn went crazy, forcing me to retreat to the edge of the lake. His eyes were blood red. I don't allow you to give birth to someone else's child. The cold lake water will definitely help you become a virgin again. He smiled evilly, loosening his grip bit by bit. My body tilted backwards. In the middle of the freezing winter, if I really fell into the lake, not only would I not be able to save the child, I'm afraid even my life would be difficult to preserve. I then came up with a plan, grabbed his hand, and pleaded, Crown Prince, I agree, I will divorce. I beg you to spare the child. He laughed eerily, so I took advantage of the situation to push him away, loudly saying, All right, I don't need the child, you send someone to bring the abortion medicine here, I will drink it in front of you. He nodded in satisfaction, and immediately ordered the palace servants to get the medicine. Not long after, a little palace maid bowed her head and carried a bowl of pitch-black medicine, walking over step by step. Finn took it, brought it in front of me, and said in a voice like a vengeful spirit, Drink it, I want to see you drink it. I glanced around, only seeing the swaying shadows of trees, and not seeing any palace maids at all. In the middle of the freezing winter, if I really fell into the lake, not only would I not be able to save the child, I'm afraid even my life would be difficult to preserve. I then came up with a plan, grabbed his hand, and pleaded, Crown Prince, I agree, I will divorce. I beg you to spare the child. He laughed eerily, so I took advantage of the situation to push him away, loudly saying, All right, I don't need the child, you send someone to bring the abortion medicine here, I will drink it in front of you. He nodded in satisfaction, and immediately ordered the palace servants to get the medicine. Not long after, a little palace maid bowed her head and carried a bowl of pitch-black medicine, walking over step by step. Finn took it, brought it in front of me, and said in a voice like a vengeful spirit, Drink it, I want to see you drink it. I glanced around, only seeing the swaying shadows of trees, and not seeing any palace maids at all. He must have chased them all away before coming here. I held the bowl of medicine, frowning. If I don't drink, I'm afraid I won't have a chance to see my husband again. I took a deep breath, about to drink when the cold blade of a knife flashed in the bowl. Before I could react, I saw a shiny knife stabbed straight into Finn's chest. Blood gushed out like a fountain. The bowl in my hand fell to the ground, shattering at my feet. I glared, covering my mouth and nose with my hands, waves of nausea rising. Finn lowered his head to look at his chest, stiff as a stone statue, slowly turning around. Behind him was a familiar face. Flora. You, slut. You dare to kill me? Flora's face was scratched, her hands were full of pus. She laughed madly, pulling the knife out of his chest. Your Highness, you ordered someone to slash my face, and ordered the eunuchs to humiliate me every day. You didn't expect how long I had to please that old eunuch before he would take me to the palace, right? Finn's pupils contracted, and he staggered towards her. My legs went weak, and I almost fell, but Jonathan rushed over in time and kicked Finn away. Luna. Are you okay? I hadn't recovered yet, and just shook my head. Jonathan hugged me, gently stroking my head. I pointed at Finn. He's about to die, quickly send a physician to save him. Jonathan looked at the bowl of medicine on the ground, then looked at Flora, and asked lightly, "Do you want to die with him or let him live and you die?" Flora wiped the blood from her mouth and smiled faintly. "Do you want him to die?" Jonathan coldly snorted, "If you choose to die with him, I will take care of your family." Hearing the two words "your family," Flora's eyes immediately turned red. She wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes, and before the soldiers in the palace could arrive, she hugged Finn and jumped into the lake in the middle of winter. Before Finn could call for help, Flora pressed his head down. He struggled a few times, but then there was no more movement. When the Emperor and Empress rushed over, I could still hear Flora's last desperate voice from the middle of the lake. "A reversal of the wind is like a solution, it's not easy to break it." I leaned against Jonathan's chest, my emotions were mixed. For Flora, and even more so for Finn. Looking at the blood spreading across the lake, the Empress slowly approached, her voice trembling, "Save him." In the end, Finn was still saved, but when Flora was pulled out, her whole body was pale from being in the water for too long. The imperial physician examined her and reported to the Empress, "One body, 2 lives." The Empress covered her mouth and ordered, "Throw Flora's body into the cemetery." After returning to the mansion, I was so scared that my limbs went limp. Jonathan stayed by my side all night, telling me about the beautiful stories in the books and the new things in the capital. I lay in bed for 10 days, and he told me all 10 days. When my body had fully recovered, I wanted to go out for a walk. In the middle of the bustling crowd on the street, there was a beggar with a fierce face being beaten. "You say you are the Crown Prince? The Crown Prince is dressed like this? The Crown Prince is going into a beggar's den to fight for food with stray dogs? TSK, what a shameless person. Dare to impersonate the Crown Prince, be careful or we will report you to the authorities and arrest you." My body suddenly trembled, reflexively turning my head to look towards the voice. At the same time, the other person's gaze also swept towards me. A cold chill ran down my spine. If it weren't for the maid supporting me, I would have sat down on the ground. That person, isn't it Finn? Has he fallen to that extent? It seems the rumors are true. After being saved, not only was his face disfigured, but even that place no longer had the ability to continue the lineage. Unexpectedly, Flora hugged him and jumped into the water, and in the lake she even severed his manhood. Now even if the imperial physician saved his life, he would still not be able to become a human being. Later, I heard that he had plotted a rebellion, was hated by the emperor, stripped of his crown prince position, demoted to a commoner, and was chased out of the palace. Luna Farah. You bitch. It was you who caused me to become like this. He pushed the beggars aside, rushed forward to hit me. I suppressed my nausea, called out to the beggars, threw them a bag of silver, and coldly said, "You guys take this money, see that beggar? I want him to fight with wild dogs for food every day. I will never forget the previous life. He once tortured my family, causing the whole family to be skinned, dying a horrible death. In this life, I want him to taste the same thing." The beggars received the money, glanced at each other and laughed, then turned around and said, "Rest assured, nobles. We eat well and drink well, we absolutely will not share it with him." I nodded in satisfaction. "Take him away, the farther the better." Finn had not even touched my shirt before the beggars dragged him away. He roared, angrily shouting, "Luna! You will not have a good ending. I will be reborn, you must be buried with the entire family to pay me." His roars grew farther and farther, until I could no longer hear them. Only then did I calm down, leisurely strolling around to admire the scenery of the bustling market. 3 years later, the third prince ascended the throne, and Jonathan was appointed prime minister. I became the prime minister's wife, admired by everyone. My family no longer suffered the fate of being torn apart like in my previous life. My clansmen all lived a peaceful and prosperous life. A few years later, Jonathan retired and returned to his hometown, taking me and my daughter with him to travel everywhere. I asked him why he didn't stay in the imperial court. He whispered in my ear, "I'm so tired, I just want to have another child with you. But I don't have enough strength." My face turned red, my eyes drooped, I raised my hand and punched him. He pretended to kiss me, I gently pushed him away, looking at the little girl in my arms. "We'll talk later tonight, our daughter is still here." He kissed me lightly, smiling and whispering in my ear, "Do you want another daughter or a son?" I raised my hand and pushed him away again. I lifted the curtain of the carriage, only to see the rustling green bamboo. The spring was bright. Finally, I lived a life completely different from the previous one.